Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA. I'm your host, Ned Zentner. This is Central Washington University, and this is a man wearing a white shirt. The local time is 11:47 a.m. Pacific time, and today's date is Thursday, February 20th of 2025. Yeah, that's right. We're still going. We're still going. We started this thing in early November, and we are still going here in late February of 2025. We're loud and clear. I think we have a working camera. We got a bunch of snow in the last couple days, but the sun is out. The breeze is stirring. It feels like we made it. Barry Manilow. It's one of those mornings, it's one of my favorite mornings of the entire winter, where it's late February and we have made it through the winter, and there's high temperatures in the 40s, even the 50s in the next week. The snow will be gone, but it's that breeze. It's that breeze that feels like we're about to enter spring. And I can't wait. Where are you viewing from this morning? I'll warm up my mouth. I've been mostly solitary this morning, and we will get started. Of course, our program will begin in 12, 13, 14 minutes from now. You look for the chapter title if you're watching this in replay. Paul says, Ned Zentner. Thank you, Paul. Chelmsford, England. Hans is in the Netherlands. Langford, UK. Edinburgh, Scotland. Okay, come on, man. 4 for 4. Oh, across the pond. Love it. Sandpoint, Idaho. Colorado Springs, Colorado. Garrett, the Dutch night owl from the Netherlands. Hello, Garrett. Michael's in Springfield, Oregon. Mark is in Klamath Falls, Oregon, in the Northern Basin and Range. Down to live. Stan says Stan is in Asheville, North Carolina. Bill's in Bastrop, Texas, y'all. Jerome K is from Jarrett, Virginia. Lottie the Roddy in the Covington Glacial Channel. Hello, Tom. Soldiers Grove, Wisconsin. Don says Fairbanks, Alaska, plus 9 degrees Fahrenheit. It is 44 degrees Fahrenheit. I know it doesn't look like it right now. 44 degrees Fahrenheit here in Ellensburg, Washington. You've got to love it. Listen, if I was a winter recreation person, this wouldn't be such a big deal. But for whatever reason, I have never been a downhill skier, a cross-country skier. As much Liz wants me to do that, I just can't get into it. Ice climbing, all that stuff. Nope, no thanks. But Gary Paul loves to outdoor recreate, and there he is. Along the North Fork, Stilley. Good morning, backcountry Gary Paul. Kalamazoo Gary, not to be confused with the other Garys. Dan is in Rainier, Washington. Mark is in Leamington Spa, UK. Bob is in Riverton, Illinois. Tom is in Ketchum, Idaho. A lot of men in here. Let's find some women. Josephine, that's Joe. She's over in Hogue Hall on this campus. Trolling for women now. Oh, Lord. Kelly, possibly a woman. Greetings from... Get off of the man-woman thing. Come on, what are you doing? Come on. Portland, Oregon. Fabian, Alberta. Highland, Michigan. Roseburg, Oregon. Packerland Volcanics. Spokane, Washington. Another Spokane, Washington. Sunny, Tucson. Betty says, I'm here. I love you, Betty. I'm here too. We entertaining myself here this morning in a borderline creepy way. Okay, just keep going. Northwoods, Jean. Lindsay Malone on Queen Anne Hill in Seattle. Hello, Lindsay. Skagit Ed. John Harris, minus 15 degrees, Farmington, Pennsylvania. Miss Koff in the Bay Area. Hello, Miss Koff. Kimmy, former neighbor, Kimmy A is in LaConner, Washington. We miss you. Across the alley. Grandpa Carl. Oh, boy, everybody's showing up today. I think we had Jeff Tepper as an early bird. That never happens. The mayor of Tepperland is back, everybody. Okay, I got a couple quick thank yous. We're over 400 live viewers, and they will continue to pour in. Docky the Document Camera says, Jill, a cousin of mine, literally a cousin of mine, Jill Angler, what up, homie, from Camas, Washington, says, I ordered these for myself last year, but got them after episode Z. So you get a free pack to share with with you for fun. Your New Glarus pioneer cousin, Jill Angler. So Jill has these thank you, Jill. She's got a whole packet here. Collect them all. And little stickers to fix these little colorful hearts. Even there's purple hearts in here. Thank you, Cousin Jill. And also thank you to Anthony in the greater Detroit, Michigan suburbia. Oh, by the way, there's a talk tomorrow. Feel free to tune in live if you like. Friday, February 21st is tomorrow of 2025, noon Pacific time. Dr. Ann Egger from this department talking about effective teaching in undergraduate STEM classes. But Anthony says, nice things, nice things. I'm counting on your sense of humor regarding the comic strip. I am not a caricaturist. Normally, I paint abstract and surrealism. The strip was created with love and respect and maybe humor. With admiration, Anthony. Thank you, Anthony. Let me show everybody what you sent. It's a comic strip. Nick interrogating a rock. Panel 1. We have ways to uncover your secrets. Panel 2. What is your mineral? Where did you originate? What is your age? 3. Is it safe? Hi-ya! 4. Yeah, I see. Thank you, Anthony. A toast to you, Anthony. A toast to Jill. A toast to all of you. Oh, we even got more breeze now. Is the camera frozen yet? Yeah, it's stirring up there. Oh, man, love it. Love it. I'm going to take that walk and really breathe in that fresh air. It's that stale air that gets trapped in our valley for weeks and weeks, and it just feels like winter's never going to end. This is just from my point of view. And yeah, I haven't taken a break since we resumed the series in mid-December, so I'm loving putting these episodes together, but I'm pretty much on empty. So let's enjoy the last 3 letters together. And there we go. A couple of final hellos, and then I'll take my walk. Dayton Lights, Peter Wine says, nicely done, Anthony. Oh, many of you are commenting on the beautiful gifts. Thank you. Yeah, Oscar, it looks cold, but it's 45 degrees Fahrenheit. We haven't had that in quite some time here in Ellensburg. Jan says, hello from Vancouver. Snow is cool. Snow is so cool to see, says Ana Rita, who's in Portugal. Yeah, I suppose. We occasionally have grad students in our department who are from Florida or Southern California, and they're either super in love with the snow or they're just absolutely extremely bothered by walking in snow and ice. The BC Buddy is watching from Monashee Mountains in the Shuswap, BC. Thank you. Always a special thrill to see new people that at least are new to my eyes as I see you scrolling by. Wonderful. Let's give you a shout out the window. Nat, hey, Nat the Wonder Boy. It's still herky-jerky. We're buying some new cameras before April, okay? Open your Sears and Roebuck catalog, Nat. Let's get some new cameras, okay? I'll find some money in my pocket. I'll get the lint out of the bottom of my left pocket. Next to my hanky, I'll find a couple of $20 bills. We'll buy a couple of cameras. Okay, Nat? Everybody else, thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed today's program. We will begin in 5 minutes. Hot mic. All-American mic. Hot mic. Okay. Different kind of show, right? Different kind of a show. You set that up early. Get people ready for an unusual vibe. How are you going to start? You're going to define the title. God, what else? You've done that. You've done the thank yous. How else are you going to get started? All right, you got 4 minutes to figure it out. Take a walk. A pleasant good afternoon to you all, and thank you for joining us today for episode X. I had to look. Episode X, called Uplifted Calderas. It's a weird title. Let's start there. Why Uplifted Calderas? Okay, quickly, let's just try to set the tone for today. 48 hours ago, I thought it would just be a caldera show. We would just jump right to these things called calderas. This is not Geology 101. You know what a caldera is by now. It's a super big crater. It's tied to volcanism. And there are Yellowstone calderas. There's Kilauea calderas. There's calderas around the world. But we are, of course, focused on the Cascade Mountains in the Pacific Northwest this winter. We're almost done with the alphabet. And I think our last major theme are calderas. I know it's the last major theme. So a couple days ago, I'm like, okay, what am I going to call this one? And I literally set up this live stream with the title, Calderas, exclamation point. I made a title slide and everything. But the emails kept coming in from geologists who've been watching the series. I mean, come on now. The factory is now humming along. The factory that we have built together, piece by piece, it's now humming along at maximum efficiency. And today's tone is almost like I'm the delivery person between geologists who've been thinking, sending suggestions by email, and then I'm the person sharing the emails with you. And instead of this being nothing but calderas, there was so much email stuff talking about uplift. Do you remember the last episode? The last 30 minutes of the most recent episode 5 days ago was asking questions like, when did the tectonic uplift finally begin in the Cascades and why? And are we sure it was tectonic uplift? Are we thinking it's something to do with a change in the amount of magma coming up from the subduction zone? Well, I'm going to spend the first half, I think, of today. I don't want to rush it. I'm at least 20 minutes, but maybe more, on follow-up thoughts, remaining dribbles of things coming in, and some of them are quite exciting, at least from my point of view. We'll see what you think. But it's not me doing a bunch of teaching. It's me just reading a bunch of emails to you and sharing a bunch of video clips from the video library. And then we will finally, at some point today, transition to calderas. And I have to, before we quit, introduce you to Team Caldera. And I will explain before we quit today. That's the plan today. Let's go. I start by going to nickzentner.com. It's a place that you've been many times before. Here we are doing episode X, and there's just a few letters left. I promise not to keep saying that. And if we go to the video library, have you been recently? There are 4 brand new interviews just from this past few days. Eric Cheney, set up by his daughter in her home. Thank you for Eric's daughter to set that up. Kelly Wall from her office at the USGS and the Cascade Volcano Observatory in Vancouver, Washington, outside of Portland, Oregon. Dave Tucker from Bellingham, Washington. That's a return. So if you've already seen an interview with Dave, that was the first one, but this was a triumphant return of Dave Tucker. And then Hannah Shamloo, just yesterday afternoon, or late morning actually, and we talked about the goat rocks. So there's a lot of information that's been coming at me and through me, and I've been cogitating on. And the goal is to try to figure out how to assemble those thoughts, those ideas, those emails, those conversations, and get them into these last episodes before we end the series a week from right now. A week from right now will be the last episode, episode Z. Okay, very good. I still want to be at the website, though, because I want to take my time, before we get into the slides, I want to take my time and really highlight a few papers. So we are in episode X. Google Earth by Glenn is making a triumphant return as well. We'll talk about him. We'll talk about the spreadsheet. I promise. That's Team Caldera. That's coming. But there are papers new and old. I'm literally going to open each of these papers, I think. Douglas Wilson, the late Cenozoic kinematic model for fault motion within the Greater Cascadia. I have barely looked at these papers. I'm telling you that up front. Aaron Donaghy is going to come probably next time, now that I just think I decided what I was doing this morning. So Aaron's going to wait. Some of this, Paul Hammond and his former geology grad student, Karin Patridge, some of that's already been there, but I want to get to this. So there's a paper, a very good paper by Lydia Steisch and others at the USGS, crustal structure and quaternary acceleration of deformation rates in central Washington. So that's tied to our uplift stuff. By God, Mullen, Emily Mullen, God bless her, is back yet again. That same paper, maybe the most important paper of the entire winter, is back talking about the Explorer plate. Mike Eddy can wait. Poor Hammond stuff. Rapid exhumation of the Alps by Matthew Fox. Like, what am I doing? Am I just randomly finding papers? The point is, these papers were suggested by email from a number of geologists in the last few years, and some of these go back 30, 40 years. Here's Tanya Atwater, for goodness sake. And this paper, suggested by Hannah Shamloo by George Priest, was published in 1990. So you have a lot of resources, some of which we will dig into, but again, I want to be fully transparent. I was posting papers an hour ago, email, and just take the paper and I don't even read it, just put the thing up on the website. So maybe one last opening comment and then we will start. Today's going to be a lot of questions. Today is going to be less teaching of specifics. Today is going to be an open set of questions and ultimately possibly initiating some future work in the Cascades. Because I think this uplift thing, we're spending another half of today's letter in the alphabet, there's a lot here. And a bunch of the work has been done. And who's willing, who's interested to take this uplift stuff in the Cascades another couple of steps, add some new techniques, and cross the finish line somehow? Feels like we're there almost, but nobody's really kind of consolidated a bunch of this stuff. So maybe we can help. Maybe this community can help with that. Okay, I think that's plenty. Let's go to the slides, and I'm just going to follow my nose. You know how that goes. I don't have this all in my head. I just set this up so that I can remember what I want to do roughly, and then I just kind of spitball when I feel like I want to spitball. So by now, it's pretty clear that this is almost, I think, almost our final version of the colors and the dates. And yes, we've made it. We're up here at the very top. We're up here for our last three letters. We're up here at the top. We're in the teens. And no, we're in the aughts. Come on, man. We're in the aughts. And we have one more Saturday morning to go. Saturday morning, February 22nd, 2025 at 8 a.m. And then the grand finale will be a surprise guest on Thursday, February 27th at noon Pacific. One more look back. Look at how we got carried away with blue. And we're only devoting, it turns out, 2.5 letters to the goat rock scene, but that's fine. I think we've set up enough narratives where that's all going to work just right. Okay, good. So we're in purple firmly, but the number 7 is debated, as we were talking about last time. Let's keep going. So this is coming. This is coming. This beautiful, handsome group of people, the Goat Rocks team. And this was a photo taken last August. And the leader of the project is Dr. Hannah Shamloo from Central Washington University. And next time, and episode Z, we will lean heavily into this collection of people and the work of Haley Finch, Hannah Shamloo, Kelly Wall, primarily. Wonderful. And then, yeah, if we're feeling nostalgic, I don't know. Do you remember this was Mark after episode A? I had a hand-drawn thing. He's like, I can come up with something better for you. And so this was when we first started the series in early November, and we laid out the color scheme, and I just kind of randomly thought we'd do 3 letters with each of these. Well, it turns out that's not what happened. And we also had to take a big unplanned break, if you recall. So here we are, finally getting to the end of the alphabet, and we're only doing 2.5 letters instead of the 5 planned letters, but I still think we can cover the goat rocks sufficiently. Okay, you ready? The first half of today are carryovers from our last episode. And if you're watching this in replay and you didn't see the last episode, I don't know, maybe you stop this one right now and you go back to the last 30 minutes of episode W. Is that right? WX? Yeah, W, to catch these narratives and these open thoughts. But we're jumping right back in to Saturday morning's discussion. Let's do it. Okay, on the board, the last two episodes with the brown shirt, and eventually I took the brown shirt off in the middle of the Saturday show. I was wondering about the low Cascades and the flood basalts crossing the Cascades. You remember that question now. And I did track down Eric Cheney, who has been thinking about this most of his long career at the University of Washington. Here's a clip from the Eric Cheney interview, and the full interview is waiting for you in the video library. Eric. Come on.
And that's an entirely different concept than thinking of local basins.
Yes, yes. And so back to the flood basalts, which are flowing basically on top of one of those unconformities, I think, right? The idea is before the flood basalts, were there, a few million years of missing time before we unleashed the Grand Ronde lavas? Am I thinking of that correctly?
I think the basalts rest on various volcanic rocks of the Southern Cascades.
Okay.
And there's not much of a time lapse between them, maybe just a million or 2 years at most.
Okay.
Geologically is a blink.
Yeah. But it is one of your unconformities, I think, right there at Grand Ronde time. Yeah. And I think I want to come back to these lava flows crossing the Cascades. I just did a program on it, and everyone was excited watching the program like I'd never heard of this before. I never even thought about the idea that these Grand Ronde lavas made it any further west than, Cle Elum, Washington, or Rimrock Lake or something like that. Has there been resistance to that idea just because those CRBs are not up in the high Cascades? Or
there probably is. I think that resistance is melting. It's becoming increasingly obvious, I think, to most people. Now, first of all, I want to correct you. The basalts did not cross the Cascades. The Cascades were not there when the basalts came out. So it was essentially a flat plain. And that's why the basalts could get all the way to the sea. There was no great topographic or other barrier to intercept them.
Well, I've been doing is. Let's continue with another video clip, just setting the stage for more uplift discussion. I managed to find Gary Smith, longtime geology professor at University of New Mexico. And back in the 1980s, Gary Smith did a bunch of papers in a short amount of time on the Ellensburg Formation. And even though we're saving most of the Ellensburg Formation until this spring and Geology 351, this clip from Gary Smith helps us see this is another way to document the uplift. And also, if we're uplifting in the Cascades, that means we've lost so much of the original volcanic material. By looking at the sedimentary basins at the margins of the Cascades, Gary says here's another way where you can get some rich detail of what used to be in the Cascades. Gary Smith.
Working in the Ellensburg in Washington, the source areas weren't there to see. And while that wasn't the motivation for my study of those volcanoclastic rocks, it was this idea of, well, in many cases, volcanoclastic sedimentary sequences may be the only records we have of volcanoes that we no longer see. Right. The Central Oregon Cascades at the end of the Deschutes Formation time in the earliest Pliocene subsided into an intra-arc graben and got buried under younger stuff. But up in central Washington, it's just the opposite. The uplift of the Cascades stripped away, at least at that time, I don't know if anyone's found anything subsequently, any of the proximal volcanic edifices that would have fed all this acidic detritus down into the Kittitas, Natchez, Yakima, Sela areas. And so it certainly was of interest to me to think about how can we maybe pinpoint where those were. So that the black areas, polygons on that map, were essentially taken from mapping that had been done by Roland Tabor, Paul Hammond, Jeff Clayton and Joe Vance, and sort of identified places where there were high-level dacitic intrusions that at least had the mineralogy that would match up with Ellensburg detritus, because The Ellensburg debris, from a petrographic standpoint, is very homogeneous over several million years.
Okay. So that sets the tone. There's some emails coming in just a second, but it seems like I had a good idea that I should draw something. Why not? So if we just draw some basics just to involve everybody as quickly as possible, we've been establishing this idea that there's this low cascades for so much time in the history of the Cascades. Through much of our rainbow, we have low cascades. And as Eric Cheney was saying, it was a flat plain. Well, I don't know. We've talked to different people, and some who've looked carefully in Hammond Land, for instance, Paul Hammond himself and Don Swanson and others, they see evidence of elevation, but it's not high cascades. That's the idea. And so all through I'm not going to use all the colors, but all through the 50s, all through the 40s, all through the 30s, all through the 20s, all through the teens, it's still pretty low. Even halfway through the aughts, depending on who you talk to, even halfway through the aughts, for goodness sake, we're still low. So I think that's the framing that business about if we're going almost the entire history of the Cascade scene. And I can say scene because we started even before the volcanic arc got established. You remember the Green M&M and Mike Eddy and Jeff Tepper and all that. So if most of the history of the Cascades is a series of low hills or even no hills, when and why are we starting to jack those low cascades up into the high cascades? Docky, when are we going to lift? When are we going to get apparently pretty quick high cascades? And as we talked about last time with Sky Cooley, then and only then do we get dry and wet. Do we actually have the rain shadow thing for people living in Ellensburg versus people that live in Seattle? I don't know if we needed that cartoon, by the way. But I've been teaching Geology 101 a long time. I've always visualized the Cascades as a dominant mountain range. I knew they were kind of low, but not flat for so long, and not super low for so long. And it's only now, in the last week, that I've really tried to think carefully about dramatic lift. And in 101, one of my t-shirts that I always talk about, it's not literally a t-shirt, but I always said, this should be a t-shirt in this class. Uplift intensifies erosion. Uplift intensifies erosion. Well, maybe even that mantra's wrong. We're going to see one email that says maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's erosion intensifies uplift. What? Let's go to the emails. Let's go to the emails. Thank you. Viewer mail, like the old Letterman show. Okay, we start with this guy. I've talked about him a number of times. Jordan Carey. He's in his early 30s. He's just starting, hopefully, a long teaching career here at CWU. He sent this last night. Hi, Nick. Really enjoyed episode W. In Geology 101, I probably see something every quarter along the lines of the mountain range to our west is 40 million years old, the Cascades. And we move through the rest of the class with the assumption that the Cascades have looked the same for the past 40 million years. Tall. I make little white lies all the time in 101. However, this one might be harder to stomach after this winter's series, this alphabet. I am always looking for new content for Geology 101. Why not make this a new unit before I talk about Mount St. Helens? Rise of the Cascades. What caused the uplift? Tectonic story? Magmatic story? What is the evidence of a young uplift? Is it tied to clockwise rotation and fold thrusts? What do the Columbia River basalts in the Ellensburg Formation, a unit that they get to know up close and personal, have to say about uplift timing? Lots of open questions to remind the students that there is plenty we don't know while learning about their own backyard. So many fun teaching ideas coming out of A to Z, both in content and approach. Thank you, Jordan Carey. Thank you, Jordan Carey. So it's not just geologists watching and sparking some new ideas. It's not just general viewers around the world watching and having new ideas. It's people who have new teaching ideas. And it's inspiring to be working closely with the guy who's just upstairs who sends an email like that. Thank you. Keep it going. But it's not just teachers, although this guy is. Michael Brown, I don't know Michael. I think he was a longtime University of Washington geology professor. Michael says, just a thought regarding rapid uplift in the last 3 million years. My former colleague, Sean Willett, who's now at ETH, I don't know what that is, was a pioneer in the idea that erosion can drive uplift. Thus, climate is a factor in mountain building. Glaciers are particularly effective in scouring wide, steep valleys that then, through isostatic compensation, drive the ridges to new heights. Could the recent Cascade uplift have been fueled by Pleistocene glaciation? I have not fully checked research related to the Cascades, but I did find a paper by Sean's group relating to the Alps. That's the Fox paper of 2015, waiting for you, viewers, which also seemed to have had a speed up in uplift in the last few million years. Okay, over in Europe, they've got the same press the button routine. The paper seems to come to a conclusion that it's complicated, but the difference in uplift between East and Western regimes could be a result of more glacial erosion in the West. Thank you, Michael. And Michael also helped set up the Eric Cheney discussion. Thank you, Michael. Keep going. James Hinthorn, who was a long time when I first started here at Central Washington University in early 1990s. Jim Hinthorn was the department chair, and Jim Hinthorn was an excellent teacher and advisor, and he did wonderful research as well. Jim Hinthorn was a major influence on what I've done here at Central. And Jim, in his retirement years, has been watching this series, and here's what Jim has to say. Hi, Nick. Watching Cascades the last few weeks, live or in replay. About once per session, I have an idea that occurs to me that might help to explain a question you're exploring. Example from last Saturday, why did the Cascade start rising rapidly about 3 million years ago? I made a mental note to send you my thoughts on a question, but then you came up with the email from Andy Miner, who's a former student of Jim here at Central, in which he gives my thoughts, much better stated than I would have, plus some good related items. This sequence of events have happened several times. You or one of your geologists beat me to the punch. Makes me feel frustrated. But then I realize that I should feel good that my ideas are at least not totally terrible. This is a well-accomplished geologist who learned at Santa Barbara of Cliff Hobson and these others, but he's got humility. Thank you, Jim. Related thoughts on what I have somewhat abrupt start to the recent fast uplift. Is it possible that the subducted subsurface Silesia block finally warmed up enough to achieve some buoyancy? Andy Miner's idea of a change in subduction parameters has to be involved, I think. So is it possible to examine speed changes of seafloor spreading for the last few million years beneath Washington and Oregon, by looking at the supposed mirror image patterns on the west side of the current spreading ridge? That's a novel thought. And you're like, okay, teach me about that and show me the paper. You're missing the point of this episode, dear viewer. I'm just relaying all sorts of open questions, and I hope that you can absorb the excitement that this series is inspiring. Let's keep going. There's going to be a bunch of these hanging questions that are all tied to uplift, and you know I'm hoping to inspire some new work at some point by somebody. Andy Miner, the former student of Jim Hinthorn, weighs in. My take on these this is the actual email that I read in the last episode that turned Jim on, so let me read it again. And I think a bunch of people in the live chat were also impressed with this. So let me read it again. My take on these north-south uplifts, the Coast Range of Washington, Cascades of Washington, Hog Range anticline between Ellensburg and Vantage, is that because they are very long wavelength, they are similarly deep-seated and, quote, don't care, unquote, about the state of stress in the upper crust. There is also some evidence that this is episodic, maybe due to changes in slab dip offshore, including the arching of the slab below the North Cascades of Washington. Lydia did point out that just because uplift at the latitude of the Columbia Gorge was mostly young didn't mean that everybody had to have that timing. You can't limit yourself to one study. Okay, thank you. Chris Mattinson, upstairs in the building, geology professor. Hi, Nick. A few thoughts on the last few shows. Going back to red time, the Tatoosh age being similar to Grand Ronde, brown. If emplacement, so the brown Tatoosh being similar to the brown Grand Ronde, do you remember? If emplacement depth estimates are available for Tatoosh, maybe that would show minimum amount of uplift here and could compare to constraints for the Columbia Gorge. Different topic. I think that in the video library, that conversation you had with Gene Humphrey, University of Oregon, mentioned interpretation that the Juan de Fuca slab has multiple breaks in it, and the most recent break corresponds to crust that would have entered the trench about 7 million years ago. I think Hannah Shamloo mentioned that the petrologic division between modern high cascades versus ancestral cascades is also about 7 million years ago. And that correlates to change in subduction rate angle. Interesting that about 7 million years ago also seems to be when significant uplift is happening. So maybe all of this is connected at a bigger picture story? Why not? Let's keep going. Remember the Steamboat Mountain thing with the Grand Ronde brown lava, that little scrap up in the high cascades, is interesting. It's too bad that geochemistry does not match the CRBs and the Puget Lowland that Andrew Sadowski mapped. But maybe the McCoy Canyon flow was once at Steamboat, but now is eroded? Where is the closest McCoy mapped? And is it pinching out? Seems to me that looking for evidence of range-crossing rivers would be a way to tackle this question, i.e. west side sedimentary rocks with provenance requiring a source east of the Cascades. Okay, let me check in with you. How are you doing? This is a different episode. At least the first half is the whole thing is going to be up. By the end, I'm going to be struggling with Google Earth on my computer. That'll be fun. Stay tuned for that, everybody. I'm terrible with Google Earth. And Google Earth by Glenn's going to be watching the last part of this episode with number 2 pencils. He's going to be snapping them over his knee like this idiot. I set this all up. You can't even do the most basic things with Google Earth? Glenn's like screaming at his monitor. We're going to try. So everything's going to be a little bit different today. Hope that you enjoy it. But we're reading emails and sharing open ideas. I've said that 4 times. I'm not going to say it again. Let's keep going with the emails. Okay, so then what's this that Hannah mentioned? So I email Hannah. And Hannah says, in case of further interest, a good paper summarizing the time definitions of ancestral to high cascades around 7.5 is in this attached paper by Priest, 1990. You've got it. It's waiting for you at the website. George Priest, working for Dogami out of Portland, Volcanic and Tectonic Evolution of the Cascade Volcanic Arc, Central Oregon. I'm ignoring the phone. Thankfully, that hasn't happened that often this winter. Except maybe it's Hannah saying, I don't know. I'm waiting. I'm not waiting. I'm distracted by the phone. Instead of pulling all the detail out of the papers and assemble it, which we have done in the past with these episodes, this one I'm kind of steering you towards the papers themselves. I'm just trying to get you interested in going to the papers, maybe more than you normally do. And you're like, I never look at the papers. I don't know why you keep putting the papers on. That's a waste of time. You're lucky I watch these things. That's fine. But there are geologists who are very into this stuff, especially young geologists who want to do more work in the Cascades. They're going to use those papers. Many of those papers are always behind paywalls and everything else. So there is a role for the papers. I hope that you know about the role by now. Kelly Wall, who we will hear from in interview form next time, USGS, Cascade Volcano Observatory. After our interview, Kelly spent extra time emailing me and said, something we didn't get into our interview today, Nick, but I think you talked about in a recent episode and I've been thinking about a lot too, is this chicken and egg question about tectonic uplift in high Cascades volcanism. Did a major tectonic change in the 4.5 million year old range drive an increase in volcanism? Or was an increase in magma flux ultimately the driver of uplift? As you know probably better than me, there was this long period of quiet in the South Cascades of Washington, and then boom, Simcoe volcanic field, 4.5 million. Boom, Goat Rocks, 3.5 million. Boom, early Mount Hood volcanism, 3 million, and so on and so forth. Did something happen tectonically in the early to mid-Pliocene that would have enhanced magmatism in the Cascades? Do you know someone who could weigh in on this? Maybe Lydia? Let's go to Lydia. There's an interview with Lydia Stice in the video library. We listened to her a little bit last time, but I forwarded some of those emails I just read to you to Lydia, and within a half a day, got a beautiful email, detailed email from Lydia Stice, USGS, out of Portland, Oregon area. I'm going to read the email to you. This is my email to Lydia. Lydia, I did a Cascades Uplift live stream on Saturday, and the Uplift discussion queued up here. Please watch it. Unexpected, strong reaction from viewers and geologists emailing since the show. I think I might want to follow up on a few things on Thursday's show. Specifically, are you familiar with the attached Priest 1990 paper? 7 million years ago plate change offshore? Did you have some working ideas for plate changes 7 million years ago, or maybe 3 or both? Did your Saddle Mountains work tell you that major changes were happening offshore at 7? So I put together a Hell's Canyon downtown lecture right before the pandemic, and I was deeply into this Hell's Canyon stuff, and I was inviting Lydia Stice up. I didn't know her at the time. I invited her up to Ellensburg to give a talk, and I took her out to the field, down to the Grandpa Carl's clay pits and everything. And I got to know her a little bit then. I haven't done a whole lot with her since, but she was doing a deep plunge into these ideas about uplift in the last 12 million years, not in the Cascades per se, but outside in the Yakima Fold Belt. So what did we get from Lydia? Hi, Nick. I am familiar with the 1990 paper, and it presents a few interesting ideas that also have been the subject of continued research. From my Yakima work I did during my postdoc, I saw accelerated deformation in the Yakima River Canyon region, Menastash, Umtanum, Sela Butte, from about 2.5. From the Saddle Mountains research, we used the Ringgold Formation on the north side of the fault cord anticline to reconstruct deformation. And it seems like there was an acceleration sometimes after or younger than 6.8. We couldn't tell when, but it was just after that time. So we're not really seeing anything specifically at 7 in the northern back arc. I think this increase in uplift going on in the Washington Cascades is perhaps separate from the changes George Priest was looking at. He was down in Oregon talking about the high lava plains, certainly showed some westward migration in volcanism, and others have also suggested this is due to slab rollback. The modern subduction zone is definitely steeper in the South Cascades and has higher curvature than the slab beneath Washington and BC. And this Miocene initiation rollback in southern Cascadia could have been induced by the Yellowstone hotspot. The Yellowstone hotspot always finds a way into this story, but I guess a continued thermal torch at the base of the lithosphere really has a notable and prolonged impact. Okay, I'm starting to glaze over. We're out of the Washington Cascades. We're talking about stuff in Oregon. No offense, but I just haven't been thinking about Oregon much. So I keep going with Lydia's email because maybe she'll come back to Washington, and she does. Okay, maybe that's what's going on in southern Cascadia, but what about the accelerated crustal thickening in Washington? That's not the extensional regime Priest was referring to. It's compressional up in Washington. From the Yakima Folds work that I did, I saw the regional latest Miocene-Pliocene accelerations as an opportunity to also think about what large-scale tectonic changes could cause that kind of organized increase in uplift. And while hunting for evidence for slab-related changes, I was trying to figure out if there was anything that could explain an acceleration in shortening across the region. My brain was fixated on north-south shortening, not so much east-west. So we're comparing apples and oranges a bit, but they're both kind of round and both fairly tasty, so we can roll with it for now. What I noticed from sifting through the literature was that there's a possible 4 to 2 million year old shift between the Explorer and Juan de Fuca plates offshore, where the Explorer plates began to move independently from the Juan de Fuca plate around 3 to 4 million years ago and stabilized around 2.4. If plates are moving independently, that means they're not connected. Ergo, a slab tear may initiate. Come on, baby, we're all the way back. Are we really talking about slab tears again, Jeff Tepper? Are we really talking about a break-off? Are we talking about a rollback? But are we doing all this in purple time? It appears we are. The next few emails are going to talk about those kinds of concepts. You remember we were doing that back in blue time, back in the 40s. That's why we spent so many letters in blue. And I was obsessively going to Jeff Tepper. How many Zoom interviews did we do back in December and January? If I had a bunch more letters, and I don't, I'm on empty, come on. If I had a bunch more letters, I would expand purple and just try to keep finding stuff that we established with tectonic models in blue time and do something similar up here in purple time. But we're just going to flirt with it because we got to get to the goat rocks, which I definitely want to do, and we want to get to those calderas as well. But this is fun to come right back to some of these concepts, but they're now young as opposed to 40 million years plus. Oh, where did I stop? Oh, down here. If plates are moving independently, that means they're not connected. A slab tear may initiate. There's also evidence for a northward increase in asthenospheric melt compositions from Glacier Peak in Washington into the Garibaldi volcanic belt in British Columbia that would point towards a slab tear in the North Cascades area. Maybe it looks like this. So she's got some figures. Explorer plate, that's oceanic. Juan de Fuca plate, that's oceanic. Here's the spreading ridge offshore. This is today, I think, right? Isn't this today? And we're doing the same kind of, we need Paul and Kashmir again, man, for purple time. Come on, Paul. In the 2018 tectonics paper on Yakima Uplift that I wrote, and viewers, you have this one waiting for you as well, I posited that this slab tear could be the cause of strain reorganization in the North Cascades and back arc to induce an increase in north-south shortening. I know, I can hear it. If you're a casual viewer, you're about to click off. I understand. We're in the weeds right now. But it's my choice to include some weeds, even though I'm not fully teaching the context of all the weeds, because I think most of you understand what's happening right now. I'm just collaborating with whomever I can collaborate with, and those weeds, those details, are potentially useful if we try to explore the Explorer plate option. I'm about done with Lydia's email here. It's a good one. The hypothesis is kind of out there, and honestly, I was rather surprised that I didn't get much heat for proposing it at all. But it's a plausible mechanism to increase the compressional strain accommodated within the upper crust that lines up in time with what we're seeing. The alphabet series seems like it's starting to highlight how many different things are going on through space and time, and you've highlighted how a lot of these questions and ideas were brought up decades ago, and that we have not solved them yet. Maybe we're not done with the story because the characters are so rich, and we need to develop each of their plot lines first. Thank you for the beautiful email, Lydia Steisch, USGS in Vancouver, Washington. One more, this is her paper, it's what it looks like, so you can go and dive in if you're motivated by that email. And this is another figure from Lydia's paper. And here's something called the Nootka fault. Never heard of it. Never heard of it. which apparently is this very major boundary between the Explorer Plate and the Juan de Fuca Plate, and suddenly we're in BC. Those up in BC who've been wanting to get Canada involved in this series, we're heading there, but not for a long time because I got to do goat rock stuff, which I'm excited about. Well, if we're talking about BC, of course we're going to hear from Jerome Lessman, who lives on Vancouver Island. Jerome is busy teaching this quarter, but he sent something last night. The Nootka Fault, Nick, is the main boundary between the Explorer Plate and the Juan de Fuca Plate. I recall some loose associations between Nootka and an isolated linear volcanic belt near the northern tip of Vancouver Island. The volcanic rocks are now exposed on Vancouver Island and offshore near Malcolm Island / Sointula. Interestingly, the provincial parliament in Victoria is faced with stones, dacites, from the quarry from one of those volcanic centers, Hadigan Island. The age is in the range of 8 to 5 million years old. The belt is offset from the Nootka Fault, but I think it's explained by tectonics. Best I can do on this, but I'm glad the Cascades are pushing you across the border. It's a giant question mark, how events extend or don't extend, and how far north past the 49th parallel. An old favorite, Jerome Lessman, makes a triumphant return. Apparently that's the drinking phrase today. I keep saying it. I can't stop. I like that phrase. Jeff Tepper, if we're talking about old characters in this series coming back, of course I shared that stuff with Jeff. Hi, Nick. Lydia's speculation about the separation of the Juan de Fuca and Explorer plates resulting in a slab tear is exactly what Mullen and Weiss, 2013, proposed on the basis of basalt chemistry. That paper has a similar figure to the one Lydia attached that shows a stenospheric. Slow down, boy. Slow down. I don't have the 2013 paper for you. I just realized. I have the 2018 paper. So I'm sorry, I don't have this. Slow down. Getting too excited. That paper has a figure similar to the one Lydia attached that shows a stenospheric mantle upwelling through the tear and generating alkalic magmas that are seen in the Garibaldi area. I have not read Lydia's 2018 paper, but it's waiting for you, Jeff. So I'm not sure how the tear would influence regional stress patterns and cause accelerated uplift, but the timing and location of the Juan de Fuca / Explorer tear seems to be acceptable. The Mullen paper that you have been showing and featuring, 2018, shows the northern edge of the Juan de Fuca plate migrating northward about a centimeter per year as delineated by Pluton ages in the North Cascades. The results in the plate boundary being at the Chilliwack latitude when the Straight Creek Fault turns off. These are all the hits coming back. That paper was published before we had any data on where and when the arc was initiated, but if you extrapolate her 1 centimeter per year migration rate back in time, it puts the leading edge of the Juan de Fuca plate in southern Washington, where Ken Clark and I would like it at 45 million years ago. That's my phrase I keep using. I think he's teasing me. I'm still thinking about the question of what plate was initially subducting, Kula or Juan de Fuca, and need to pull together my latest thoughts, but that may not be happening before the end of the alphabet. Thank you, Jeff Tepper. Okay, we're about done. We're about ready to transition to Calderas, I think. But this is a blast. I love this, even though I can't really do much with it because I'm running out of time. Yeah, that Mullen paper, do you remember this from a few weeks ago? Emily Mullen's got, 35 million years ago to today. You see the dates down here? We're going old to young. And if you just look at the convergence rate between these ocean plates in North America, you would guess, what I think I see here is that we're generating less and less magma. And the Paul Hammond stuff was saying that as well. The narrative is the plates are slowing, the volumes of magmas are slowing down, and yet some of the calderas we're studying in the last part of today's episode are in young time. And we're doing our big uplifts here. There's the Nootka Fault separating Explorer from Juan de Fuca. This is from the Mullen paper. and this age progression, which I've ignored because I haven't given one shred of thought to, but there's stuff going on up there, faux show. Doubling of the migration rate at 4 million years ago coincided with separation of the explorer plate. So we break off the explorer plate about 4, and everybody's thinking that maybe that's got something to do with hitting the button. Thank you for your patience. We have almost 800 live viewers now. It's 1:45 Pacific time. And for the next half an hour-ish, we're going to slowly get into the world of calderas. And we'll be thinking of calderas the rest of the alphabet. You ready? I'm not going to take a shirt off. I don't have a purple shirt. It's fine. This is white. What does it signify? No idea. I'm a white guy. I guess that's what it signifies. You could have figured that out anyway, especially white in February. I need some sun, baby. Let's go. So, nothing new here. Setting the stage. We have low cascades through all the alphabet until purple time. But now, for the first time, we're realizing that there's a bunch of very impressive calderas that have been mapped in the Cascades, something that I have not taught at all. I'm with Jordan Carey. I haven't talked about the uplift in the Cascades at all. I haven't even really understood that calderas are a thing in the Cascades. Maybe once upon a time I thought of Crater Lake as being a caldera in southern Oregon. You know, it's a bigger than normal crater, and it's where a stratocone used to stand. But beyond that, nothing. And then maybe, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, I started hearing a little bit about people finding calderas up by Mount Baker. And those people are Dave Tucker, who you're about to listen to, and Wes Hildreth, who I'm hoping to interview at some point this spring. But let's do some basics of calderas and then try to understand why we think calderas are hidden in the Cascade Volcanic Arc and what color are these calderas. So this is from long ago. It's me using Sharpies with my 101 students and saying, look, I was just thinking of Yellowstone at this picture. You've got this caldera. It's a super big crater. It's got some resurgent domes within it. It's got a bunch of air fall, the ash falling out of the sky. It's got some ash flow tufts that are high silica things. And when the system was active, it's doing this. And when I was teaching 101, full disclosure, when I've taught my whole career, when I've taught calderas, I just talk about a big stick of dynamite getting blown up, and you make a caldera just from the violence of the explosion, the super eruption. It never really worked for my brain that there's a bunch of collapse with the super eruption. And you're like, oh my God, seriously? Even I know that. I took 7th grade science. Where have you been? I'm not embarrassed to admit stuff like that. Even in Yellowstone, there is collapse. There is a floor dropping inside of this newly formed giant crater known as a caldera. And it's this collapse, it's this sinking that's going to be a major theme in our last portion of today's episode. I'm not even showing it here, but we're going to drop the floor in the caldera, and that's a crucial part of understanding why these caldera deposits are even found in the Cascades. So yeah, still just thinking super eruptions and thinking about Yellowstone, and this is from a series of lectures I did a number of years ago where there's different explosions from the Yellowstone mantle plume, and I obviously am just using colored pencils here talking about the thickness of the ash that fell out of the sky. Here's the caldera, and then we have stuff settling out of the sky, decreasing in thickness of the overall ash fall. We all know this, right? And then I had a PBS episode devoted to this, so I asked if we could make an animation, and somebody, I forget who, made it in one afternoon. It wasn't that hard to make this, apparently. It's been very effective over the years, so I've used it many, many times. This is just on a loop. And this is tied to one of the super eruption events that we'll talk about next time. And you're like, really? You're going to talk about it? That looks like it's happening by Twin Falls, Idaho. It is the Bruno Jarbidge caldera, but there's a reason I want to include it in Saturday's episode. So this is a caldera-forming event tied to the Yellowstone mantle plume, but we're just getting a sense of the scale of this thing, how much ash is going to be falling out of the sky, let alone the pyroclastic flow and the surge deposits that are within 100 miles of the radius of the caldera. Okay, but if we transition to the Cascades, that's where your host, Nick Zentner, says, well, I don't think we got Cascades calderas. Do we really? Like, don't we just have dacite and andesites with these stratocone situations? Here's Ellensburg. I showed this last time. But that's what we're leaning into now. That if you look hard and you put on some caldera glasses, you can start seeing calderas all over the place. Yeah, the most obvious place is to go to the youngest known caldera that was formed in southern Oregon at what is now known Crater Lake National Park. This is the former Mount Mazama. And the ash from the Crater Lake or Mount Mazama event 7,700 years ago, you can find that Mazama ash all across the Pacific Northwest today. And this is a portrayal of what Mount Mazama looked like in southern Oregon, near Klamath Falls, near Medford, Oregon. And 7,700 years ago, there's some sort of event, and what's left is most of that stratocone is totally gone, and we had collapse of that real estate. And today, of course, you know that there's a brilliantly blue lake that sits inside of this caldera. Ding, 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 caldera in the Cascades. So we do have a less than 10,000-year-old caldera. We know the size of it. We know the deposits both inside and outside of the caldera. It's young. It's fresh. We can still see the frickin' rim of the thing. But what I've learned in the last week or two from the experts is, how do you make a case for one of these in the high Cascades or the formerly low Cascades? How do you make a case for more of these calderas in the Cascades? Are we going to be looking for these? No, we're not. They're way too old. There is no topographic rim. And in most cases, there aren't any ash beds, ash flow tufts. There aren't any volcaniclastics. There aren't any volcanic breccias at all surviving around the rim. But the key is, as I've learned from Dave Tucker, and we're going to hear from him right now, if you drop the floor of these things, if you drop the floor of these calderas, then you're going to fill the caldera with sediment, with volcaniclastic deposits, with ashy deposits, with breccias, with all sorts of stuff. And by allowing the floor to drop inside of the circular caldera, you dramatically increase your chances of preserving that circular caldera, even if it's more than 20 million years old. So if we go to Hammond Land, can we do exactly that? Can we find basically petrified calderas? I think you know what I mean. Well, if you talk to Paul Hammond, you can. And buried in all the Bumping Lake Pluton and the Ohanapakash and all these other units we've kind of been dealing with of different ages. These are not exactly the colors for us, but green is. That's the Ohanapakash. Mount Rainier National Park is right over here. Paul says, look, if you squint, put on your colorful glasses, your caldera glasses, you can find some faults that mark the rim of this former caldera. This is from the Roaring Twenties. And you can find some distinctly unique volcaniclastic deposits that are inside of this ring, and they're not outside of the ring. Let's hear more about how you can find evidence for a caldera somewhere in the Cascades. This from an expert, Dave Tucker, who was the guy that played a large role in documenting two major calderas in northern Washington, Culshan and Hannigan. Dave Tucker. Thick caldera fill. So let's talk just generally about calderas in the Cascades to this point. Like I'm a newbie with this concept. Are we usually talking about thick deposits inside of a caldera, and rarely with calderas in the Cascades do we have fill outside of these rims?
Right. So calderas, are very thick deposits of pyroclastic material, ash and hot ash flow deposits that fill the caldera as it's subsiding to hundreds or maybe even thousands of meters thickness. That what flows outside the caldera, that ash flows that flow outside the caldera, are fairly quickly stripped by erosion, especially in the Cascades where we've had profound glacial erosion. And with a caldera like Hannigan, which is approaching 4 million years in age, there have been multiple glaciations which have stripped perhaps a full kilometer of the surface away. So we're only seeing what is deposited within the caldera structure.
That works for me. Yeah, the floor's dropping out. We're bettering our chances of preserving that stuff.
Yeah. And then if you have sufficient erosion, then you cut down deeply into these deposits, as the case of Hannigan caldera or the Culshan caldera on the east side of Baker. And so you get to see these wonderful exposures. The nice thing about a place like Hannigan is it's been exposed so deeply that it's a classic cross-section of a Cascade caldera, the best that we have.
So you can pass on this one, but I guess my next obvious question is the history of this. Like, was anybody talking about calderas in the Cascades prior to 1980 or something, or prior to Wes's career? Like, I don't think I've run into that concept.
Crater Lake, of course,
right,
is very young and has not been eroded away, so we can't see what's inside Crater Lake.
Yeah.
Other than that, no real studies identifying calderas. There are some suspicious deposits that individuals thought about as possible calderas, but we really didn't understand calderas very well, even in the early 1990s.
Yeah.
At least not in the Cascades. They hadn't been recognized. No.
That was the one in October. It looks like I made a mistake there. It wasn't the one I just did with Dave. It doesn't matter, but that was the first of two conversations with Dave Tucker. I think I've got another one coming up here, but I hope you have the concept. I don't think I need to draw it for you, do I? I've just tried to use my hands to say we have this circular structure. The floor is dropping out. We're filling the structure. We're filling the mixer bowl, a KitchenAid mixer bowl, stainless steel, whatever. We're filling it with stuff. This is hell on wheels up above. We're filling the caldera, and if we uplift the calderas, uplifted calderas, we uplift it. We don't uplift it too much. We're still going to have that KitchenAid mixing bowl there with a bunch of stuff inside of it. But it's the uplift that destroys most of the evidence. That's why it's so frickin' hard to find these things. But I like the idea that on many geologic maps, for years, there have been all the telltale signs of a caldera, and nobody's recognized it. Let's hear more from Dave Tucker, I think. Yeah, this was just a couple days ago. This was a great moment. I really enjoyed this very much. Hope you do too.
W-shaped dike, but it's really just a cross-section through a prismatic section.
Mm-hmm.
So in the field, you might have something like this to give you a suspicion that you're looking at a caldera deposit. Very, very thick ash flow deposits. and breccia.
Hmm.
On the south side of Hannigan Caldera, south of Icy Peak, which is up here to the upper right, there's a fault cutting right through that.
Yeah.
It's about 900 vertical feet.
Hmm.
One kind of rock, non-volcanic on this side, and this side, everything on this side is volcanic rock. It's tough. It's caldera fill. And it looks the same here, but that's due to weathering and dark erosion, dark staining of the rock. These are very different rocks on either side of this fault. So this is the ring fault that surrounds the caldera.
Holy cow. Wow.
This is an aerial view.
I mean, I think I'm going to interrupt you. Just keep this slide up, Dave. But I want to play off a couple of things. I think am I hearing between the lines that maybe over the last generation or so, there's been debate? Like some of these, I just imagine these old school mappers are like, yeah, we got a bunch of pyroclastics and there's some faults, but there's no way that's a caldera. I don't know why you guys keep talking about caldera, Paul Hammond and Wes Hildreth and Dave Tucker and a few others. Like, I don't know. Is it that kind of thing? Like this is a new way to interpret older mapping, or
no. It's not necessarily a new way of interpreting the mapping. It's understanding what to look for.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, in a way, it's a new way of interpreting some older mapping.
Yeah,
mapping isn't really that old. For
right.
instance, the mapping that shows this rock right here was originally published in my thesis in 2004. So we're not talking ancient mapping here.
Wow. So that feature wasn't even really known at any kind of scale, and you're the first to say, "Look, oh wow, okay, that's great."
Yeah, I mean, it helps to have a buddy with an airplane. You can fly around and get views of the.
Okay, so we have reached the last portion of today's episode, and we are about to reveal Team Caldera. And here's the start of it. This is a poster that Dave Tucker and Paul Hammond presented together in 2009 at a GSA meeting in Portland. I don't know, I just feel like throwing this in. I took many years off of being involved at GSA meetings and being involved with trying to keep up with the research in the Pacific Northwest. The reason why, I had 3 young boys, Liz and I did, and I took parenting very seriously and was basically just spending a lot of time around the house every day, and I wasn't doing a lot of work outside of teaching. I just wanted to spend the time with those kids. I'm no hero. I'm just saying that I took so much time off, and I would not go to national meetings or regional meetings. And I remember one of my evaluations from the department chair said, Nick should really start going to meetings. He's losing touch with what's going on in the research. And so that 2009 that 2009 Geological Society of America annual meeting in probably October of 2009, I still remember that meeting with lots of good feelings. It was so exciting to be back, number one. I saw a bunch of former students who were then professional geologists. I stumbled into talks by Ralph Hagerud and Paul Hammond and Vic Camp, a bunch of very influential talks, and an email was semi-new at the time, felt like it. Maybe I'm mixing that up, but anyway, it was easy to get papers and other things in 2009. This is before YouTube and all that stuff, of course. So I don't think I went to this poster. I would have remembered it. But this poster hung in one of the many hundreds of posters at the Portland meeting. But there must have been Paul Hammond and Dave Tucker standing next to their poster, and they're like, look, we've got dozens of calderas in the Cascades just in Washington. You need to wake up, everybody. And Tucker specializes in northern Washington. Hammond specializes in Hammondland, of course. And as Tucker tells us, this is much of just literature review by mostly Dave Tucker. and he's just trying to find any paper, new or old paper, to just find any kind of well-known or somehow kind of fleshed out caldera. I'm noticing this one right now. I think this is the one that's tied to the Spirit Lake Pluton, I think. Hang on just a second. I'm just noticing this right now. Let me go to Docky. So this is a different meeting. Sorry to jump around on you, but this is improv time. This is not the 2009 meeting I was just thinking about. This is the Seattle meeting in 1994, maybe the last one that I went to now that I think about it. So I think I had a hiatus from GSA meetings between 94 and 2009. But in this volume 2, wow, look at this. Look at this. Look at how old this text is. What is this? I think this is Megan Miller's copy. Yeah. Okay, sorry. This is in the Don Swanson and Russ Everts field trip. And they've got this Quartz Creek caldera, and it's underneath the Spirit Lake Pluton. Now, if you're an excellent student, you remember in the recent interviews, I kept saying, is that a thing that you have a caldera and then you have a slightly younger Pluton interrupting it? Just talking about that with Hannah Shamloo yesterday, talking about with Kelly Wall before that, talking about with Dave Tucker. It's fun to find these relationships. So I'm sorry, that was a diversion. I just happened to glance and see Quartz Creek Caldera, Everts in 1987, but I was just looking at the 1994 guide. So the idea is Tucker and Hammond joined forces, put this poster together. There is no digital version of that poster that survives, even though it's 2009. Dave Tucker has it on his wall, in his office at home, and maybe in all that Hammond stuff that was donated to the Washington Geological Survey. There's some digital version of the poster. But anyway, we are grabbing the details in that poster and running with it. And why did I say that? Who's we? Well, I'm not on Team Caldera. There's a team of viewers who have been doing their own research in the last few days. I think the last 10 or 14 days. And I want to reveal right now that inventory of known or suspected calderas just in Washington. That's very exciting to share with you all. Maybe you've already peeked ahead and you're already playing with it, but I'm going to now reveal it to everybody. So I don't want to do that. I want to introduce Team Caldera. So some of you remember Glenn Cruikshank. And Glenn was the major player last winter. There was Sharon from Malaga doing her work. There were others who were getting the Brett's journals from the University of Chicago. Were you with us last winter? All that stuff? And this guy, Glenn Cruikshank, in Spokane, Liberty Lake specifically, Glenn's probably in the live chat right now. Glenn had this amazing ability with his professional training to plug stuff into Google Earth. And as Glenn last winter was hearing all these places and all these dates and all these field notes by J. Harlan Bretts in every field season in the 1920s. You remember this? Glenn's like, I can't keep all these places straight. I'm going to put all this into Google Earth. And people can zoom around on their own with all this data that I poured into Google Earth, custom made for this viewer community last winter with the Ice Age floods. And felt like every letter last winter we were featuring new stuff from Glenn. Well, Glenn is back. He's been watching this winter. And Glenn and his team, it's not just his team, so Lindsay Malone, who's also in the live chat right now, I'm sure, lives in Seattle. I'm not sure if Glenn and Lindsay knew each other at all before 3 weeks ago, but it sounds like they've been going back and forth by email daily, maybe multiple times a day. And Lindsay has expertise as well as a backcountry person in Washington Cascades, right up there with Gary Paul as far as number of miles clocked or logged on the backcountry. And Lindsay had her own fuel to kind of pour through old geologic reports and everything else. So Team Caldera is mainly Glenn and Lindsay, as I understand it. But you remember Tom from Maple Valley. Tom has been making these custom-made GIS maps for us throughout the entire alphabet, the rainbow maps that Tom has created. Tom has been involved a bit, I'm not quite sure how much, with Team Caldera. And then let's not leave out Gary Paul, who has also been assisting in a major way. So I knew this was all kind of going behind the scenes in the last 10 days, let's say. And so I asked Glenn and Lindsay in particular, could they write up a little paragraph or two to describe what these guys have been doing? And then we will finish today's episode by showing you these resources. If you're confused about what's going on, there's a bunch of data that's been collected by a group of viewers who want to give all sorts of possibilities to you, future geology student, to you, young geology professor, to you, person who just wants to go out and look at some of this stuff as an amateur. Here's the summary. Nick, this list of Cascade volcanoes and calderas has multiple sources and timelines. Glenn started a Google Earth inventory of volcanoes and series places last year when you first announced the Cascade series. Lindsay put out a call on the Zentner Facebook page in early February, just a couple weeks ago, for the group to contribute to a spreadsheet inventory she compiled and posted. Gary and Tom have contributed to that list, as has other Zentners. Our spreadsheet currently includes the known calderas, poorly studied calderas, as well as sites mapped as caldera deposits, rhyodacite or ignimbrites with caldera possibilities. We've tried to collect the offhand mentions and mapped units with caldera possibilities, and currently the spreadsheet has more sites than the known calderas. It is intentionally inclusive, as it is our hope that this information might be useful to future geologic workers to have a comprehensive inventory of where previous workers noted possible evidence of calderas. Glenn then merged the caldera data, a caldera list, into his Google Earth volcano inventory and created an interactive Google My Map for viewers to use. He color-coded the labels for the Google Earth Pro version to match your current color scheme. Our current caldera inventory has a total of 26 Cascade calderas, with 19 of those in the Washington Cascades. The volcano inventory has 97 locations, with 24 volcanoes active and extinct in Washington. Footnotes on our methodology, which may be useful to geologic workers. Our map currently displays 19 caldera pins in the Washington Cascades. Our methodology entailed searching for caldera mapped units, cauldrons, volcanic centers, rhyodacite, and ignimbrites on the geologic map of the North Cascades Range, the geologic map of Washington Southwest Quadrant, the portal, Paul Hammond stuff, Dick Fisk, Frizzell. We've color-coded the calderas gold, silver, bronze, or no color based on Tucker and Hammond's 2009 tiers to indicate confidence in likelihood of a unit being a caldera. Gold, if you get a gold medal, it's published data. You get a silver medal, it's published map describing a caldera. You get a bronze, it's a unit appearing on a map as having rock types that could come from a caldera. Then we list, quote, less certain data from notes of publications or geologic maps. These sites may get some mention in the literature as having been mapped caldera remnants or welded tough rhyodacite, etc., but they weren't on Tucker and Hammond's 2009 poster. To date, this list came together thanks to the help of Glenn Cruikshank, Tom Allen, Josh Adams, Gary Paul, Lindsay Malone, and all the amazing geologic workers who originally mapped and reported the data. Getting emotional now. So if you're in geology and you're like, "What? This is not peer reviewed. Who is this? These are a bunch of amateurs putting this stuff together. I'll just do it myself." Screw you. I thought I was emotional. I guess I am. There's a lot of interest in this stuff. Here's another unforeseen effort from this community. Use it. Don't ignore it. Use it. How many hours went into this? Amazing. So the goal is to promote future geologic work. But I've had a bit of an edge right now because many geologists are just clueless to what something like this is and how useful it can be. Now, there's other geologists who are totally not so in love with themselves and they are able to see what this is. Okay, stop. Stop with this. Don't ruin a nice moment. What are you doing? All right. So here's what the spreadsheet looks like. Gold medal. It's the spreadsheet put together by Lindsay primarily, as I understand it, but others as well. I think I should go to the PDF. We'll go to the website and let me play with this a little bit. So if you're like, I'm really bad with technology, I really want to see this stuff, I don't even really know how to find it. Well, here we are. You know how to get to here, right? I'm talking to myself, man. So nickzentner.com, click on Cascades, just like normal. And then with all these papers that you may or may not ever look into, here's a Team Caldera spreadsheet. And instead of a scientific paper, here's the spreadsheet. And this is an act of love. Gold, silver, bronze. You get no medal because you're barely a possibility, but you're included. Now we've got the age, using our rainbow color scheme. We've got calderas back in the 20s. We got calderas in the 30s. What? And links. Come on, you guys. This is a lot of time. A lot of time. Thank you. That's just one. Hannah had her prongs of the Goat Rocks project. That's just one prong of Team Caldera. Let's go on to the next prong. Right down below this video right now, if you're still with us, and we have more than 800, if you go down below, it says Google Maps by Glenn, Cascade Calderas. And if you click on this, it gets you to something called My Maps or Google My Maps. So there's 3 prongs here to Team Caldera. The spreadsheet, which I just told you how to find, and there's plenty of wonderful detail there. The second prong is right now, and I guess I'm just doing screenshots, am I? Or should I actually do it? Maybe I should do it. Let me just do it quick. And that does not involve Google Earth. So the third of the 3 prongs is using Google Earth. And that's where I get a little nervous. I can handle Google Maps. So let's go to the web. Let's try to open this thing and get to something that looks like this. Glenn put this together for us that are not Google Earth proficient. I think I have a couple other screenshots. Yeah, stuff like this. So, or is this Google Earth? Maybe this is Google Earth. Let's get off of that. Let's go back. Okay, so Glenn, you got to be patient with me now, Glenn. Don't get pissed. Oh, man, what am I doing? This is the site. What if we go here? This, what's going to happen if I click on this? Oh, boy. Oh, let's try it. Don't get pissed. If I pause it. Okay, so now we're down here. And you can click on more, I guess, if you want. That doesn't help. And then we click on this. So now we're in Google Maps or My Maps. And Glenn put this together for us. So this is interactive. You know, this is just not a screenshot. So again, you would come here if you're a little skittish about using Google Earth or you can't get Google Earth Pro on your computer or whatever. And I'm just playing here a little bit. I've barely gotten here, I must admit. So I'm like, oh, I'm by Cochise Lake, and that's the Lake Cochise Tuff. And Glenn's out of control just with this. He's going to take us to a PDF, redirecting us. So Glenn has hot links going to published reports that are taking too long to load, so we're going to squint. But that's going on here at my maps. You're like, Silverthorn Caldera, what's that? It takes you there, same idea. Oh boy, don't panic. Do not panic. I'm talking to myself. Okay, I'm sure I can do other fancy flying around, but Glenn's got places where I've done videos. Oh, I see. It's got a little Z on it. So if you saw a video from Rosario Head on San Juan Island on Fidalgo. Ha! Nice. And then you can go to that video.
Lake?
Yeah. White guy. Nice. Okay, we're in the very latest stages of today's episode where you're going to see me fumbling more and more. That's not major fumbling. The major fumbling's about to come. But I need to be brave and try it in front of you, don't I? Okay. So let's, how do I get out of that without killing everything? What is this? Oh, this is the slideshow. Okay, so let's definitely get out of that. Oh, great. I'll show my YouTube feed. Okay. So we're back to the slideshow, and I think this is where we're about to go. This is, I think, the Google Earth stuff, where Glenn has also got everything organized by color. But we know the colors. Glenn's been watching, so he's got things coded by color as well. Glenn sent these screenshots probably in case I could just not function at all with Google Earth. And yeah, I mean, it's just all these angles. We're about to try this with Google Earth. Yeah, even our Steamboat Mountain. Thank you, Sky Cooley, for the tip. And our Grand Ronde lavas, our brown lavas up there. Okay. Let's go. Let's try it. And Glenn's not afraid to say, look, here's what you need to do. Open the KMZ file, put it in Google Earth, put it in temporary folders, put it in your blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I tried that half an hour ago. So I think I'm ready, Glenn. So what am I doing? There's the website. Okay, that's what I can say. So if you're, thank you for joining us today. It's just screwing around the rest of the time before we do some live Q&A. If you're a pro with Google Earth, you've already been flying around during this episode, or maybe you found it last night. It's been there since last night. But I want to try to help those of you who feel like you might be able to do this with your own computer, but you're not super confident, and that's me. Okay? So that's who I think I'm talking to. I'm talking to me, but I'm talking to maybe a few of you who are kind of in my wheelhouse where you kind of have a few skills, but you're just not sure you can pull this off. But you want to. You want to be able to use this amazing resource. Okay, so if you go back to Cascades, and you go to Google Earth by Glenn, you click on this, I think it's going to automatically download a file. And I've already done that. So now I'm going to go to, I have the Google Earth Pro in my dock, and I think I have it set up, Glenn, using your instructions where it's going to automatically go to what you've done for us. Fingers crossed. Drum roll, please. Yeah, Glenn says, put your safety glasses on now. Thank you. Yes, they're on. I also have my handkerchiefs ready and my Kleenex. Oh, cripes. This thing's not going to open? Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Not a good sign. Is that because I'm live streaming at the same time? Okay, so that worked. So I have placed Glenn's Caldera file in my places. And for those of you that know Google Earth, this is obvious, so I'll stop talking about that. Here's all the Brett stuff from last winter that I've just turned off. And so you'd think that I would use Google Earth all the time when I teach. I can't get there. I cannot get there. I can't get comfortable. Maybe this is the winter where I finally get well, here we go, though. Come on, let's go. Let's go. I push in. Glenn says, screw this. I'm not just doing Washington. I'm doing the entire frickin' mountain range. Are you kidding me? I'm not an amateur. And I'm flying and I'm holding my control key. No, that doesn't work. Isn't there a way I can like come in obliquely? Okay, shit. So what am I doing? I'm pushing way in. So we're going to go to Goat Rocks next time. So let's go to Goat Rocks. Let's go to Kelly Wall, Ton Swanson, Paul Hammond, Hannah Shamluland. Shamluland, I like that. Devil's Horns Caldera. All sorts of detail. Wikipedia stuff. Okay, now I'm pretty sure I'm not showing off the greatest thing about Google Earth. And maybe Glenn, use your uppercase right now. Type in a couple things for me to try, because I think I'm going to panic here. If I double click on that, what happens? Oh shit, okay. Well, now we're down in... Oh my God. Glenn, seriously. Davis Peak Caldera. So Glenn, have you typed in all this stuff? I'm looking for Glenn and Glenn only now in the live chat. If there's a couple of specific things I can try before we go to the live questions. All I know how to do is just like push in. But so far, it's kind of just like my maps, isn't it? Where am I? Am I down in Oregon now? Holy God. Well, this is better than my maps. I can actually see the... Jesus. Just try to click on a Z icon. Okay, I can do that, Glenn. Are the Z icons up here? Yeah. Let's go to Tamanois. I see. Jesus. That's where we were with Jeff Tepper, the very earliest days of the Cascades, light blue. We can come right in here among the trees with the loud kids. All right, well, the loud kids aren't there today. Let me try to go to the Spirit Lake Pluton. Wow. Can I kind of zoom around like this? Yeah, so everybody knows St. Helens and the horseshoe-shaped crater and David Johnson and all that tragic stuff. Harry Truman and the Spirit Lake Lodge and all that, and the logs floating in the water. But yeah, when I filmed that video at Spirit Lake Pluton, 2 of them this past summer, here's that Green River thing, right? Is this the Green River coming through the Spirit Lake Pluton? Green River Valley? Glenn says, go to Ruth Mountain or Icy Peak. Okay. How do I find that? Ruth Mountain here. So now we'll finish by going up towards Mount Baker with the stuff we were hearing from Dave Tucker. Wow. Oh, yeah, this is a little different up here. So where am I? There's Ruth Mountain. There's the Hannigan Caldera that Tucker did his master's thesis on. Holy shit. Mount Shuckson, green schist. That's exotic terrain and pizza boxes. Oh, wow. So I see. So in the middle of all this rugged stuff, where's that face? Where's that face with the W thing on it? Gary, you know where that is? What did he say? He said in the video, in the interview, he said Icy Peak is in the upper right. Well, there's Icy Peak. Click Hannigan Peak. That's probably that face with the W and that exposed caldera wall. Wow. Click on Hannigan Peak. I got to find Hannigan Peak there. You want me to click it though? Don't snap your pencils, Glenn. I'm trying. Oh, is this it? Is that the W? Look at that Hannigan. The face is further north, a lower mountain. To the north, says Lindsay and Gary. Thank you, guys. Okay. Okay. Hours of entertainment, education, pure pleasure for free coming from a subset of viewers. Glenn, Lindsay, Tom, Gary, and many others. All that waits for you, courtesy of this series and this series only. Wow. Thank you. I think that's it. I'm going to try to go back to the slides just to see if there's something crucial that I want to care. Yep, there is. There is. This is the last thing we're doing. Brand new photos from Backcountry Gary, specifically for the Caldera stuff. Let me just give you a taste, and we will probably revisit some of these on Saturday morning. Thank you, Gary Paul. We finish with some rainbow labels, courtesy of Gary.
With calderas.
Yeah.
And big ones at Goat Rocks, big one at Mount Baker.
Well, you're the guy that got me going on that, so thank you. You're the one that mentioned that a year ago. Like, what's up with the calderas and the Cascades? And I've been chewing on that ever since, and I don't know how far we will get with answers, but just an inventory. Shut up. All right, here we go. Purple. This is the Caldera fill. All of this, I guess, except for this block of fruitcake. Damn. Zoom in. Pyroclastic, ashy stuff, mapped by Dave Tucker. Caldera collapse, mega block. So yeah, I was curious about the volcanic breccia. Caldera fill. This is Kulshan. And yeah, Tucker says, yeah, these mega breccias, that's just a side of the caldera with a big debris flow or a big mass wasting event coming into the side, filling the caldera. Craziness. Look at this. You put your finger or you put your camera lens cap on the boundary between Darrington Phyllite from the exotic terrain fruitcake and Caldera fill, and the rim of the caldera can get down to that kind of detail? This is wild. Caldera fill. And this is all preceding the building of Mount Baker Cone themselves. The expertise and the generosity and the humility, it's all on display with all of you, but especially members of Team Caldera. We will pick up with that and more from Dave Tucker on Saturday morning show. It's time for some live Q&A. It's 1:35 p.m. Maybe we'll do another 10, 15 minutes or so of questions. And then that probably will give me a few ideas on what we might try to do on Saturday morning. We're hosting a noon lecture tomorrow. Ann Egger talking about effective teaching in the classroom. So it's going to be one of these mad scrambles on Friday night and Saturday morning early with Bijou to get ready for Saturday. But I think I can do it. I've got enough ideas already put together for Goat Rocks. Uppercase. Just a thought, more caldera formation due relatively more high silica magma available before the boom de la volcanism? Thank you. These are high silica events. We're not getting these calderas forming in basalt, as far as I understand it. But it's the timing of this. We'll explore this on Saturday, but are we getting the high silica caldera formers early in the system when an area comes to life? Or late? Or is there a pattern? Hans, is there a pattern in the ages of Cascade caldera formation relative to the ages of the associated volcanoes? Great question. I guess to answer that, we'd need to start zooming around with Team Caldera and see if we can find a pattern. The guy in the Yukon, David, can you elaborate on the technique you discussed with Hannah about the formation depth of the plutons inside of the caldera? It shows uplift and time to do it. I'll try to do that a little bit on Saturday, but I'm pretty weak with that. But yes, many people are coming at an angle of uplift from doing barometry within the pluton to try to decide how shallow the magma is crystallizing. I don't totally get it at the moment. Nashville Eddie. In addition to the rhyodacite and ignimbrites, are there other indications of kimberlite dikes associated with or outside of or within caldera systems, like at Devil's Horn? I don't think so. I think kimberlite dikes are very high pressure and very deep things. And I think most of these magmas we're talking about and these calderas obviously are forming at the surface. Good thought, but I think that's a separate set of ideas. Just W. Is Mount St. Helens on the path to becoming a caldera rather than being in a rebuilding phase that we have been told about for the last 40 years? What distinguishes an outlook of renewal versus demise? Thanks for the question. These are all good questions. I think the caldera is a totally different animal with much higher explosive and much more caldera collapse. And so it's a scale thing as I understand it currently, that our rebuilding of a dome within the crater of Mount St. Helens since 1980 is dramatic and impressive. But the scale of that crater that formed from the collapse or the northward blast on Mount St. Helens is a small event. I know that sounds crazy, but it's a small event compared to the scale of these calderas that we're talking about today. Thank you. Regine, that's French. Is there a caldera with active magmatism, volcanism in the Cascades today? Is there a caldera with active magmatism? I guess Crater Lake in Oregon still has active heat and magma activity within it. And that's our very young caldera. But I think you're asking about, of these 19 other mapped calderas in Washington, do any of them have an associated heat source? Well, yeah, I mean, I guess they all do, Regine. Not Goat Rocks, but maybe that's where we head on Saturday or next Thursday in our last episode. If we go to each of the dozen most obvious active cones in the Cascades, is there a caldera at each of those sites? That's a simple question that I suppose the Team Caldera has already answered for us. I'm going to think more about that. David, is it possible that the Cascades will become low once more and then rise again? Possibly do this many times? I think the answer is yes, if we're willing to wait another few tens of millions of years. So it's not like the Cascades have been waiting for this high Cascade scene that we currently enjoy, and that's it for the rest of the future of the Cascades. If we can ever figure out why the button is pushed, then we will maybe understand that pressing the button to get the high Cascades is just a thing, and it's a temporary thing, and that in itself has a lifespan. Maybe the high Cascades as a whole have a lifespan. And then we get into the future of the Juan de Fuca plate itself, and how many more years we're actually going to have subduction in the Pacific Northwest. That's an interesting thought, he says to himself. Weird. 3 more. Jeff, can a caldera form without a pluton? I think so. Well, I'm not afraid to look dumb, obviously. I don't think we can form a caldera unless we have a major magma reservoir underneath. But my current knowledge is that the dominant solidified magma, pluton, is usually younger than the caldera. So can you have a caldera without a big magma body? No. I don't think that's controversial. But you're asking about a pluton, which is a solidified magma, right? And you're like, well, of course you're not going to have a solidified pluton before you have the caldera explode and collapse. So watching an older gentleman try to process things, laughable. Richard, has anyone looked into a connection between the Cascade uplift and the boring volcanic field extending into southwest Washington? Yes, I think they have. And I will, in the last episode, a week from today, I will be talking about what my plans are for Geology 351, which are 2 live streams a week with students. And we're definitely going to be learning what we can about the boring volcanic field, the Simcoe volcanic field, all the tephra. I'll save that for next week. 2 more and we're done. Michael, does the ring of Mount St. Helens become its steamboat prow as it rebuilds? Don't think I follow that one. 2 more. Jim, the largest calderas in the Cascades seem to be an order of magnitude below other subduction zones like Toba, New Zealand, Andes calderas. That might very well be. I don't know what interesting thought. Comparing our calderas in our subduction zone with other calderas. I'm sure plenty of people have thought about that. Last one. Scott, when the continental plate is rising due to collision and it being light, is there a redistribution story creating the volcanics? We're right back where we started today, Scott. Thank you. Are we rising the continental plate, which is overriding the subducting plate? How much uplift is just tied to the collision between 2 plates? How much uplift is tied to a major breakage of the ocean plate into 2 smaller plates? How much is the uplift due to speed up or slow down of a subducting plate? How much is due to the ice age? Is it an accident? Is it an accident that we dramatically increase the amount of erosion in the mountains because we have a series of ice advances? Doi, of course it's not an accident. The ice is a great way to erode a bunch of rock, but I think I'm asking something different, aren't I? Is uplift somehow tied to the ice ages? We're back to that email from Michael from the University of Washington. He ends with a question, Nick Zentner does, on Third Person Thursday. A toast to you. Here's to you for joining us today. Here's to your health. Here's to the health of your family and friends. Here's to the health of everyone in your greater circle. Family, friends, co-workers, neighbors, everybody. Do you have a community? We all need community, don't we? Especially these days. Thanks to all the geologists who emailed me. I appreciate your contributions and your very inspiring text. And thanks to everybody out there for being so engaged with what we're doing. And if you sent me an email with an idea, I certainly read it. I just didn't have time to reply. Thank you. And of course, the biggest thank you to Team Caldera, where we will continue to enjoy your work in the last two letters of the alphabet. Thanks, everybody. Tomorrow at noon, Dr. Ann Egger. Look for the live stream. Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific, that's me coming at you again from my office. And a week from today, Thursday, February 27th at noon Pacific, the thrilling conclusion of Cascades A to Z in the winter of 2024-2025. Thank you, I love you, and goodbye from Ellensburg, Washington, USA. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye. Herky jerky. Herky jerky.